Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined Lethbridge-Stewart as he defends Fang Rock from green jellyfish and werebeasts, and arrive at episode 265. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Very good, thank you.
Very good.
You guys have a good week?
It's pretty uneventful.
Yeah.
Don't do too much.
Same here.
I watched a lot of movies. That's about it.
There was some big news this week, in case anybody did not see it.
What?
Yeah.
There was big news in Doctor Who?
Big news.
Get out of here.
They did not win the National Television Awards.
Aww.
Doctor Who lost out once again to Downton Abbey for Best Drama. Oh, that is news, but that's not the big news I'm talking about.
Hold on.
You can sort of excuse that whole Downton Abbey thing since this
It's
was
the
their
final
last season. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried watching Downton Abbey, couldn't get into it, but
Sarah loved it.
Say it one more time.
That was not the big news? Or Doctor Who lost?
Yeah, that part.
Doctor Who lost.
Doctor Who lost to Downton Abbey.
We gotta get him a soundboard. Yeah, we've got to get him a soundboard.
I worked way too hard for that.
Yes, you
Yes,
did.
you did. No, the big news is Steven Moffat is going to step down as showrunner after Series 10. Which won't be until 2016. Or no, 2017.
2017. Spring
We're
of
in
2017.
2017. There's three bits of news couched in this one bit of news. Moffat stepping down effective after Series 10. Series 10 won't air until spring of 2017, which means we get a Christmas special in 2016. That's it. I hope that for like Red Nose Day or Children in Need, they'll actually do a bit of something more than they have since they won't be filming.
I can virtually guarantee you we won't get a scene from an episode.
That's true. Yeah.
So, yay.
And then, taking over for Series 11 will be Chris Chibnall.
How's it pronounced?
Chibnall?
Chibnall?
Chibnall.
Chibnall.
Chibnall. I always thought it was Chinball. It's not.
No,
It's
there's no N.
Chibnall.
The N is after the B.
I think we've said
Chibnall.
Chimball in the past, but it's
Chibnall.
Chibnall.
Okay, so let's break this down and deal with these one by one. Reaction to news item number 1. Aw. Not unexpected. We knew it was coming. The seeds had been planted. The garden was growing. He'd been hinting. So I'm a little disappointed, but I also think it's probably about time. And I'm okay with it.
6 years is a long time to run the show.
Yeah.
6 seasons, I guess.
Piece of news number 2. What?
Christmas!
But I personally, I like Doctor Who being on in the spring. I think it works better in the spring. I don't know why. I just, that feels right to me versus August.
Well, I'm all right with that. The problem that I see is the controller for the BBC, and I don't remember the woman's name, but she said that the reason why they're holding off on releasing Moffat's last series in 2016 is because they have so much programming going on this year that they don't want Doctor Who to get lost in kind of a mix because the Olympics are this year, and she cited 2 other big major events. And so she decided they needed to focus on Doctor Who and give it its own space for being, I think there's probably some truth to that, but I think there's also some politically intrigue there. They're trying to gloss it over, but I'm sure there are other. I think it's spin. I think there are other contributing factors in there. I think number 1, you don't have to spend as much of a budget. Then this year you can bank up some money.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing, though,
when did season 9 premiere?
In the fall.
I knew it was September.
August,
proper, right?
September. Yeah.
The other thing that people are speculating is, does that mean now from here on out, after spring of 2017, does that mean we'll get spring Doctor Who every year from then on out? And the problem with that is if we don't and they go back to fall, then we have another
long
9 months that we have to wait.
That wouldn't surprise me either.
Actually, it's more than 9 months. It'd be almost more than a year to wait for another series Doctor.
Which
you get Christmas again.
That which they didn't really address the Christmas after season 10 in everything I saw.
There will be
one. Go that far. There will be one.
Yeah, they just said in a season 11 he'll take over. But it wouldn't surprise me if they did push it back. That way, as the new showrunner, he would have plenty of time to get things done and get things organized and get things ready.
Well, I think it's good from that
if
situation.
They fall,
Well, even now, knowing that he's going to be the showrunner, I have a feeling. I mean, they're not going to wait to film Series 10 next year in 2017. They're going to be working on it this year.
Yeah.
So Chimbo will have all of that time that leading up to, even if they did 17 in the summer for Moffat for season 10, and then in the fall they did series in that same year. They did series 11. Chimbo still has all the time from this point on. Yeah. I mean, he's wrapping things up. I think probably on Broadchurch, which he is the showrunner
season
for.
3 airs this year.
Yeah. So I mean, he's wrapping things up there. And if I don't know, I didn't get the impression. Are they finished,
I haven't heard
or is he going to helm both shows?
I haven't heard.
So there's that.
It depends on. I guess it depends on if there's more Broadchurch story to be told.
Right. Then the other thing that you have to look at is, we're getting Christmas. Yay. I don't want to say that I suffer from new series fatigue, but if a year off means we've done it before, guys. We've gone long periods without Doctor Who. But if that means
some of us have gone longer periods than others.
Good Series 10. I mean, look how good Series 9 was.
If they could take that time and elevate it even higher.
I can't say that I'm sad that we don't get any this year, but on the flip side of that, I think maybe I've just come to terms with the fact that this happens.
BBC does what BBC does.
We should know that Chimbo's not. I mean, he's familiar with Doctor Who. He wrote 42, The Hungry Earth, and Cold Blood, Dinosaurs in the Spaceship, and The Power of Three. So those are the particular stories.
And mostly good ones.
And a lot of Torchwood.
He has written a lot of Torchwood. Well, and the fact that he has...
And some not so good ones there. But...
Power of 3 was good.
No, on the Torchwood end.
I was going to say, all the Chimbo ones I liked. Hungry Earth and Cold Blood is probably my least favorite of that batch. But
I don't remember the specific Torchwood episodes other than Cyberwoman.
I think he did the majority of season 1. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I should have, but I didn't pull it up. No, and who called it? This guy right here. I said that he's the logical success. And I love, I don't know if you guys saw, there were so many of these who might be taking over who posts that showed up just out of the woodwork the last 2 weeks. Here's who we think would be good. And they had people that were like, have you even watched the show? Because this person's not affiliated with it in any way, shape, or form. But they think this... and no offense to Rachel. Rachel Talalay was listed as a potential showrunner. It's like, director. No. That's not how that works. You know? I mean, she's a very talented director. She's a phenomenal director.
Directed, it'd be different.
That would be different if she'd had some sort of writing credit. Somebody that had only written one episode before was listed on one of these lists. And I'm like, no.
I think he's a really good... I think he's a good choice.
I think he's a great choice.
Despite what you feel about his episodes previously. I mean, pretty much, I think...
Well, Broadchurch has seen huge success,
I think that's
and it's helmed by,
why.
acting-wise, it's helmed by David Tennant. So
I think his success with Broadchurch is part of what tipped them to it. But if you just looking at his Chibnall's Who history, I mean, looking at Moffat's before he took over as showrunner, most of fandom considers all of those higher echelon.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no way you could follow up that kind of higher echelon writing. I don't think there's other stories people point out to as best of that are as consistent as Moffat was. So anybody they chose, there was going to be episodes that they did that you probably would not like as much. And I'm sure there are people who did not like some of Moffat's early work.
If I had to rank New Who on its own, and I wouldn't, but I think 42 would be in my top 10.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. I need to go back and revisit that one.
Yeah. I think I'd agree with that.
What's great is he shows range in his stories that he's done. He's shown a great amount of range. From dinosaurs on a spaceship to the fun of that, and then the serious turn at the end.
Power 3
Power
too
3
is
phenomenal. Is a lot of fun. And then, well, that's for a different reason.
Yeah.
And then the seriousness of Hungry Earth, Cold Blood, and 42. It just, there's so much well balance there that I think he'll do a really good job.
Did he do an Eccleston episode? He didn't, did he? It was
no, 42 was the
42
first
was
one
the first one he did.
Which was season 2, right?
Season 3.
Oh, that's right.
And now
Martha.
That's right.
Now the downside is we don't know if he's going to get a Capaldi episode because there's no news on that.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Is he going to stick around?
Oh, who knows?
Bridge the gap? Or you think they're going to try to do a hard
You can
reset
speculate
like
way too much because, number one, Capaldi's dropped hints within the last month. And number two, it makes sense for a new showrunner to bring on a new doctor. But who knows?
Yeah, it's hard telling.
And there's talk of season 10 not involving an actual long-term companion. So that would be, you can start fresh with a companion in Series 11 as well. So
that would be good.
I would be okay with that. I would be okay. I know that they have also said that Series 10 is going to move, not necessarily away from, but they're going to do something different than the format. There won't be the two-part cliffhanger style episodes in Series 10. That they're going to do a lot more of the standalone kind of things. And so
it'll be like an extended specials year.
Yeah. And so if they did that and had a different companion in each one of them, I think that would be kind of cool. That we could, really get a good.
It will be a lot like the specials year.
Get a good range that way.
Yeah, if they do that.
It'd be really interesting if they did a whole series of one-offs with different companions, and one of those people was going to become the new companion, but you didn't know who it was going to be until you got to the end of the season. That would be a lot of fun, but that's just me talking.
I'm trepidatious, but I'm also excited about Fresh Blood. I think it's needed. So,
in the same boat. I'm sorry to see Moffat go, but Doctor Who is.
We knew it was eventual. I mean, it was going to happen at some point or another.
I'll be sad to see Capaldi leave, but it's going to happen. So that's just the nature of the show. So I, for one, welcome Chris aboard and look forward to him, and I will be rooting along with the rest of you for whatever Moffat has in store for us for next season, and I will be sadly counting down the days until it comes back. But
I know I'm going to be bumping Broadchurch up on my to-watch list to kind of get a taste of him as a showrunner.
Well, the first season I heard was just incredible television.
So did I.
The second two,
it was on my list to watch anyway.
The next series was highly rated, but they said it wasn't as good as
even before it was Grace Point.
The first series.
Grace Point was not highly rated.
No, it wasn't.
He's an EP on that, or was.
Yeah. Anybody watch the X-Files?
No, I knew it was
on
on
got delayed because of the game.
Well, the game was on tonight, so in fact it might still be on now. The X-Files might still be on. But, Holly and I were going to watch it, and then we decided, we just watch it on Hulu when it drops. So,
just curious.
Next episode's tomorrow.
Is it really?
Yeah. They're doing one of those weird things, and then it's going to be on Mondays.
Tomorrow it falls the Grammys? For the Emmys
no.
or some awards show?
No.
Oh no, the awards show's next week.
It's
next Sunday. Never mind.
X-Files and then Lucifer.
That's right.
I'm kind of excited for Lucifer.
It's gotten really good reviews. One of the best cop shows they've seen in a while, from what I've heard.
All right, well, let's move on to feedback.
Our bit of feedback comes from Chris about said news. He says, I think this is the most depressing thing I've heard in a while. No, not the fact that Moffat is leaving. We all know that was coming at some point soon. It was just a matter of when. The part of this story I found depressing was the news that, other than the Christmas special, there will be no Doctor Who in 2016, with a whole lot of exclamation points. What the bleep? What is it with British television? Most British shows have such short 3 to 13 episodes seasons to begin with, and then, as if to add insult to injury, you have shows that take 1 or 2 or 3 year hiatus between seasons. It's just plain ridiculous. Sherlock is a prime example of this. You get 3-episode season, followed by a 2-year hiatus, then a New Year's Day special, followed by another whole year before we get the next 3-episode season. As far as I'm concerned, that can barely even count as a mini-series. If an American show tried that, not only it lose all of but its most devoted fans, it would be canceled long before its return and would never get a chance at another season. And I think rightfully so. Maybe it's just my age. When I was a kid 30-plus years ago, most television shows had between 26 and 32 episodes per season. That's a 6.5 to 8 month long season. Is it any wonder I now feel cheated by 13 episodes or less seasons? And then to have to wait a year or more between seasons is completely intolerable. I'm sorry, BBC, but this really sucks. Chris.
I think the key points in there are...
Passion's running on the surface.
I think the key points in there are British television versus American television. Yeah. The thing is, we as Americans are used to the format of British TV, or of American TV. And so we already have preconceived notions of how television works here. So when BBC or British programming gets very popular in the U.S. and it has its own style of formatting, then it's so obscure and abnormal to us that we can't wrap our brains around it, so it frustrates us. But if we lived in the UK, we would live with the... I mean, for crying out loud over there, some seasons get 10 episodes, or they call them series, get 10 episodes, some get 6, some get 8, some get... It just really depends on... Some come in...
Torchwood Children of Earth got 3.
Some will come...
5. Sorry.
Some will come in the fall, and then the next year it'll come in the spring, and then the next year it'll come in the summer. It all comes down to the whole government-run television and that format and that structure. And ultimately, I actually find myself enjoying British television more because of the short seasons. Because number one, what happens is they're able to focus on really good storytelling.
Yeah, how many of those 26 to 32 episodes of the American season were really good?
Well, that's just it. We're on a roller coaster over here because you'll have to watch 2 or 3 kind of mediocre to lame episodes before you get a really good story. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they become filler episodes, as we've come to call them. And then but with British television, you get 6 to 10 really good, solid stories, and it's great storytelling. And yeah, if I have to wait just a little bit longer to get really, really good television, I'm fine with it. It's because there's a whole backlog of really great British television that you can do to fill the gaps in with. So,
well, and I think that's definitely something you're seeing a lot of industry changes kind of moving really to that model in America. When you look at things like Game of Thrones on HBO or even The Walking Dead, shows that don't necessarily...
Or Agent Carter or X-Files, who's only getting 6 episodes.
Right.
Pay television was the first to really embrace the British format and do series in short spurts and do really good, solid television. And yeah, you're right. The American networks have kind of followed suit.
They're starting to.
And I know anime series in Japan kind of have the same thing because it's based on manga. They'll come out and do, a season 1, and however many episodes it may be is going to be based on, how far in the books there are at the moment. So they'll commission, that first season, and then it might be 2, 3, 4, 5 years before a season 2 comes along because they have to wait for the manga to get far enough out that they can start producing more episodes to catch back up to them again.
That's part of the problem with Outlaw Star was they were getting ahead of their the manga, but instead of putting it on hold and waiting, they wrote their own filler episodes, and they were some of the worst episodes of the season. Yeah.
And then you've got the other thing, which is when they decide that they're just going to go ahead and write their own story and finish it off, and then 5, 6, 7 years down the road, they relaunch it and you reboot the show with basically the same first season, maybe some different voice actors, but then the second season comes out and it's much more in line with where the comics are at because that's where they're at this point. So it's just kind of an up in the air thing. And
I think the other thing that I see in British television, at least in a handful of shows, is they'll reinvent the cast. They'll completely bring a new cast of characters in and have very few holdovers. And I really appreciate that because you have some really good stories with one group of people. Skins is one good example of that. You have these really good characters, but you don't get tired of them because then we move on to a next set of characters.
And then
we move on to a next set. Yeah, exactly. And so I really kind of appreciate that aspect of it as well because it doesn't get dry and drawn out. Because when you're exploring a character and you've got a real popular television series that you're trying to spread out over 8 or 9 seasons in the U.S., a lot of times I'm tired of a character, especially if they haven't grown that much. So
yeah.
I think that's why you see shows like American Horror Story doing so well because of that anthology nature and
it's
changing
the same
it
actors,
up.
But they're just changing the characters.
Yeah,
and bringing in fresh blood.
So I feel for you, Chris. I do, but at the same time, it's like, we'll weather the storm. You know, that's what Who fans do, man.
We've done it before. We've done it.
We had the wilderness years when we thought it was dead. And I know all the new Who fans like, we're so sick of hearing you talk about the wilderness years like that was a thing. I was like, well, it was a thing. We thought it was dead. Plus, you've got Big Finish, you've got comics, you've got Lethbridge-Stewart novels.
Yeah, there's
all kinds of stuff out there
to fill the void. And any classic Who you have not seen yet. There's always that you can go dip your toe into. If you haven't been a big classic watcher, maybe you can go start finding more copies of those and giving those a shot.
Or at, 13 episodes a season for New Who? And we've got
rewatch them all.
9 seasons. Do the math. That's one a week. You can keep yourself busy until the show comes back on.
All right, well, should we move on to our reviews? If you do want to contact us, keep in mind that you can send feedback to feedback@travelingthevortex.com. You can find a new form on our website. So if you prefer to go to our website, go to Contact Us tab at the top of the screen. Click on it, and there is a form box that you can fill out. And we have basically done away with our old form box, what we think maybe was stymieing us and giving us issues. We have a new form box on there. It shouldn't look much different to you. The interface looks different, but it's pretty much works the same way. Fill that out and send it to us if you prefer to do it that way. You can also contact on the various forms of social media, which are Facebook, which is just www.facebook.com/travelingthevortex. You can also contact us on Twitter @travelthevortex or at each of our individual Twitter. And then also you can find us on Tumblr and Google Plus and Goodreads. We have the
Traveling Vortex. The new book is up.
Yep, Traveling Vortex book club. So go vote in the poll.
And it's actually a send feedback tab, not a contact us.
Send feedback, yes. Thank you for checking.
So you think that was the deal, huh?
I don't know if it's fixed. So
we're getting the feedback.
The important thing is
it's all that matters.
Fixed.
Sweet.
And before we move on to our reviews, make sure you stick around after the reviews for an interview with Andy Frankham-Allen.
Yeah. We got a chance to sit down with Andy this afternoon and talk to him about the Lethbridge-Stewart and the 2 stories that he's written within it.
Yeah. And some exciting news. If you haven't seen it, he talks about some new things coming up. If you haven't seen the news of if reading's not your thing, but you want to listen or take in these stories, you can soon listen to them. So we'll have details on that later.
He'll talk more about that in the interview. All right.
I think it's safe to call him friend of the show, Andy Frankham.
Yeah. Speaking of Lethbridge-Stewart, this week's review involved Lethbridge-Stewart.
I don't have a synopsis for the Cult of the Grinning Man.
That's okay.
So
let's just launch right into it.
What do you guys think?
I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different in the fact that we're set up to suspect that there is, and Lethbridge-Stewart is set up to suspect that there is something possibly alien or supernatural going on. And as he pursues his leads, and we get another story going alongside that of a B-plot of a young man and a woman, and the woman is abducted by this group of people that are worshiping what they call the Grinning Man. And so we get these two kind of going in tandem, and as they go along, and Lethbridge-Stewart is investigating this situation, he's gotten the blessing from Hamilton to go on and see if this isn't indeed something that needs to be investigated, that could be outside the realms of normal military.
In their purview.
Yeah, exactly, purview. And so he goes and he explores it, and I mean, spoiler here. He gets there and finds out that it's really less of what he thinks it is, and it's more of just a cult.
It's literally more of a Scooby-Doo sort of situation than anything else that we've gotten in the run. And I really like that aspect of it.
I did too.
I like that it was a dead end for his alien investigations.
What it does, too...
We're hinted to that throughout the books, that he's kind of hit roadblocks and dead ends.
What it does is it really gives you that story of not everything is alien. Yeah. Not everything is supernatural. There are times where we go down a road to explore something and it's just run of the mill. And I really appreciated being able to get to the context of that story.
And in a short time where you don't feel like, if that were done in a full novel, you'd almost feel cheated that there wasn't.
Yeah, I thought of that, but I thought the exact same thing as I read it or after I finished it, and then I thought, but it might be interesting to do that in long form if you could tell a really good story.
If the story's really good, yeah.
Unfortunately, doing that now in a short story tips their hand in the sense that now I expect maybe there might be a long story that eventually does that. So I may be looking for it. Although maybe that's a good thing, because then I'm suspecting that maybe they'll run into a dead end this time and they don't. So maybe they've thrown me off the scent that way. I don't know.
I was torn, honestly, when I got to that point, because I was going along and I was enjoying it, and the sci-fi fan in me was going, what is the thing with the thing and the alien? Is it this? Is it that? Was it a monster? What's on the? And then it's a guy in a rubber mask. My first instinct was, oh man! I mean, I just sucked all the wind out of my sails for it. But then I thought about it. And I agree with you. I was like, no, this has to happen, and it makes sense that he's going to run into these dead ends and hit these snags and these things. But I kind of felt bad for Lethbridge-Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
Because it feels like, when you read the longer novels, that they're constantly referring to the fact that, oh, well, yeah, that didn't turn out to be anything. Oh, that didn't turn into anything. That was not a thing. And it just kind of, it almost feels like he's had failure piled on top of failure piled on top of failure in some of these. And even the ones that have been something, when you look at
there's not enough concrete
Forgotten
evidence,
Son,
yeah.
when you look at... the next one, Schizoid Earth. I don't know why I can't remember that title. And even going into Beast of Fang Rock, we're there. They've given us all this. Here it is. Here's concrete. Yes, alien involvement, supernatural involvement, parallel world involvement. Boom, and yet nothing sticks around at the end of the episode for him to be able to go, see, we need. We need this. Now they're slowly compiling it, and we're getting there.
You're building to it.
Yeah. So I do like it. Like I said, my first thought was, oh man, I don't know. And then, no, I'm okay with that. So it kind of did a 180.
It also really felt, I don't know why, but tonally, and maybe just the way it was structured, felt a lot like Mutually Assured Domination. Did anybody else have that? Where it's kind of the same trappings, kind of the same skeleton,
a remote location,
and it's the Lethbridge getting permission and then driving to wherever it is to investigate.
I can see that,
and then it's just wrapped up quicker without it's stripped down without the chorly stuff in it.
Yeah,
which made it nicely familiar in a backward sense, since. Technically, I should have read this before I read Mutually Assured Domination, but
we're getting there, though. We're getting caught up with the short stories so that we can actually do them in between.
That was just I like to think part of that is a bit of continuity, cohesion for just the line in general.
I have one small complaint. I really, really got excited when they actually put Lethbridge-Stewart in an Aston Martin.
Oh.
Because we've kind of made the comparisons before, the Pertwee years dealing with Unit. In a way, the show became very James Bond. We've got those kinds of stories going on. And so putting him in that car and having him drive up, I was just like, ooh, he's a secret agent, he's doing his thing, and this is going to be... And then we didn't really get more of a Bond joke than that. And I don't know why. I just expected a little bit more of a play on it. Minor complaint, not a big deal at all, but I just... They swung for the fences with that joke, and I was like, yes! And That was all I got.
All right, well, let's move on to our spoiler-filled review of The Beast of Fang Rock.
There's always death on the rock when the beast's about. Students have gathered on Fang Rock to celebrate the ongoing opening of the most haunted lighthouse of the British Isles. But they get more than they bargained for when the ghosts of long-dead men return, accompanied by a falling star. Anne Travers is called to her family solicitors, who have in their possession a letter from Archibald Goff, a paranormal investigator who once visited Fang Rock in the 1820s, and along with a piece of alien technology. What connects a shooting star in 1969, mysterious deaths in 1902, and the beasts that roamed Fang Rock in 1823? Lethbridge-Stewart and Anne Travers are about to discover the answer firsthand.
Dun, dun, dun!
I think we did that before. We're about to gush all over this book again.
I think I read the synopsis before, too.
Wow, I mean, it's hard to go back and review this one again because I know that I'm going to restate a lot of the things that I said in our previous review.
Well, now we can go into a bit more detail.
And we can. The thing is, it's so well put together, and I think we all are fans of horror Fang Rock. Some of us a little more, Sean, than others, but
what's not to like about horror Fang Rock?
I feel like I'm going to restate a lot of things here, but I love the idea that this really is Anne Travers' story, and it really focuses on her family and her roots and ancestry and where they come from, and it really feels like Andy fleshes that out as he's writing this story to kind of give us a lot of backstory on Anne without dragging us down into a genealogy lesson.
Yeah.
It's so well done that she's connected through the events that happen in the story to learning more about these ancestors that she's connected to in this book and in this lighthouse. It's great stuff.
It really is. And jumping forward into the book, I really like how, I think I talked about it last time, how we had all three different time zones going on at the same time, and how they all paralleled and intertwined so perfectly to explain some things that happened in actual horror of Fang Rock, and in addition to fleshing out the Beast story, and just the way he was able to work it all just gelled so perfectly.
I think the vehicle to get them there to the different eras and to get us as a reader into the different eras was well imagined, using the whole astral plane idea, time travel through the astral plane in order to visit these sites, but you don't necessarily occupy the same realm physically, and so you get to be an observer in this way. And I thought that was really cool. And there's kind of some foundation in some Egyptology or Egypt. It's not even Egyptology. It's a study of Egypt with a focus on the esoteric or the mysticism of it. And there is in that branch of the study of Egypt and the gods and stuff like that, some people that this is a common form of travel, that you're able to travel through the astral plane in a pyramid, and you could technically go back through time and see the gods of old and things like this. So I like how it's grounded in some cult ideas now, and the idea that we can go back and be observers in order to find an actual vehicle that Anne uses to finally physically transport herself back to this time was very cleverly done. Because relaying the idea of where this device was in order to transport him, they had to go back and see where it was hidden so that later they could uncover it, so that Anne then could physically travel back to the times that was even further back, I guess, than when he had buried it or hidden it in the. I assume that was a lavatory, right?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Behind the generator. Sean's at a loss of words.
He doesn't know how to describe the awesomeness.
It's just so good. We talked a little bit about the danger you run into doing a sequel to a beloved episode, or a prequel, I guess.
It's both. It's both.
It's both.
A pre-sequel.
A prequel.
Only in Doctor Who can you do a prequel and a sequel in the same book.
Because and Andy joked that there's no pressure because if you get it wrong, you get it wrong. But he doesn't, and that's the beauty of it is, and maybe part of it is because Horror Fang Rock is such a well-constructed episode. I mean, from top to bottom, everything about it, I think, works. I think that's why fandom responds to it the way that they do. Because you could nitpick, but there's not much to nitpick on it. What he has succeeded in doing with Beast is taking the trappings of Horror Fang Rock and expanding on them and making them a little bit bigger and a little bit better and filling us in with, some of the broad strokes, and then really getting in and doing the fine detail work with the new cast of characters that we're putting into these situations and putting them through their paces on the island. And that just, it all works with it. I was a little concerned with the timey-wimey nature of the plot when we got into it, and we had stuff happening in the past and in the present and in the 3 different time zones all at the same time.
The past, and the present.
Correct. And I'll be honest, my first thought was, oh no, not again, because it gave me just a little bit of a vibe of Schizoid Earth, that we were having that kind of jump around confusionness. But very quickly, it became apparent, no, not the same. Much better done with the way it's handled, but just the clarity of the pieces.
The clarity, and you're clued into it more of what's happening, as opposed to Schizoid Earth, which kind of kept you in the dark of what they were doing.
Right, admittedly on purpose, but yes. But just it was a little more straightforwardly laid out, even though we were jumping around within the time stream and the time periods. That it was still a progression from A to B, and then you jumped from F to G, and then you went back and filled in C to D. It still worked within the confines of that. Everything as we went just laid out there, and it was so good. The next bit of I'm not sure about was the werewolf.
Yeah,
we have a werewolf showing up, and okay. I mean, because it seemed like that one extra element that maybe is just a little too much, because we've already got the time travel, we've got the astral projection, we've got a Rutan. We've got a lot of stuff going on here on the island. Cool.
And I also like the fact that the Rutan wasn't necessarily a bad guy.
Yeah.
In this, at least in Anne's time, and it was pretty much when Anne travels back, the Rutan there is not the bad guy. Where in Fang Rock, he is very much the bad guy, and just wanting to get back to his fleet.
It would have been very, very simple to fall into that trap and write another Rutan stranded here, doing the same kinds of things and creating the same kinds of problems.
Without adding more depth to the Rutan.
And just being a monster to kill. And that was probably what I enjoyed most about the book, was the twist that when we get to the Rutan, he's not what you think he is. Yeah. And that you get that lovely surprise that, no, he's I mean, he is still trying to get out, but not to the extent that, the other Rutan would have blown up the planet if it meant leaving. No, we're not going to go to that extent.
Which, although it was a fragment of himself, right? Am I remembering that correctly? So it's still a him. It's just not him. That whole part was a bit fuzzy for me, but I was able to roll with it and be like, okay.
Well,
I don't know enough about Rutan physiology to understand how that works. All right.
Visiting back the werewolf aspect of this is, what I really liked about this is Horror Fang Rock sort of establishes, at least in our mind, that this beast that I think tries to hint to the idea of a werewolf in its lore turns out to be, based on the circumstances, they believe it's this mythical beast that haunts Fang Rock. It turns out to be a Rutan in this instance, and it kind of justifies or explains the situation in this
in this
story. In this situation, it explains what's going on, and it kind of then throws away the idea that, well, it was mistaken because that was the lore, and it was mistaken for that. So it's really not, that we have no proof that there was actually a werewolf. It was Rutan that they were mistaking as the beast. To go back into this story and actually justify the legend of the beast, that this is the story that the mythology or the lore, the legend that is surrounding Fang Rock actually did exist, and it happens to be because of this guy's what is it called, lycanthropy.
Yeah,
and so we get this interesting little twist. But then you're going, okay, wait a minute. We got werewolves. We got lycanthropy. What's going on here? And it's not until we turn around and realize that the cause and effect of the lycanthropy is based on the Rutan. It's based on the crash. Now, you get the impression that it's a recessive gene that is activated. So it still is within the gene, or not the genealogy, the geology, not the geology. What I'm looking for, the genes of evolution, genetics, thank you, of evolution, and it's basically sparked by the fact that the Rutan crashes here. So that's what kind of unlocks this gene. So it does still exist. But I like, in turn, that it's the Rutan that still is the cause of unlocking this gene so that this guy wolfs out.
Well, I even took it a little step further, and that it's the same thing that Tooth and Claw, that brought it out in.
Yeah.
So I kind of linked the two together that way, too. I thought that was where he was going with it.
And, maybe this guy is a descendant of someone in the royal family.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'm trying to pull up what year Tooth and Claw took place in.
But, well, certainly before there were lighthouses.
Was Victorian, because it was
1879.
Wasn't it Victoria?
Elizabeth. No?
No, it wasn't Elizabeth.
It was Victoria.
Was it Victoria?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm showing my knowledge of...
That was Victorian England.
But yeah, that was the best part of it, is for my initial, what? Why do we need why do we need a werewolf we've already got a beast? Then to get into it and go, oh ho, I see what you've done here, is you led me to believe the Rutan was the beast.
Yeah.
And it's not. And I was very pleasantly surprised to have the wool pulled over my eyes in that regard, that I didn't see that coming. And,
well, could you go into this story going, well, I know what the beast is.
Yeah. As you say, we're kind of predisposed to that through horror. And then when you get into that...
Wait, there actually is a beast?
What? So then you get through the end, and unlike some stories where it's just, well, we threw that in there just for the sake of throwing that in there. It's like, no, it's not. You didn't throw the werewolf parts in just to throw me off the scent of the beast. It had...
You gave me a legitimate reason.
There was all legitimate reason.
Basis.
Everything fit together. All the puzzle pieces came and made a beautiful picture there. And it worked so well. Which is
I think it's so nice to be able to talk more about the beast now, because I think that's what we were stymied with last time.
Yeah.
Is we did mention it, but we were kind of having to talk around it, so we didn't spoil it much. But now we're...
I kind of knew that going into this. So this is where I'm going to focus. I'm going to talk about the werewolf. You guys can talk about the lighthouse and the island and all you want. I'm going to talk about the werewolf, because that's the part that. So yeah, it was so nice to get to that, and like I said, everything came together. It all just worked, and it worked within the confines of not just being a great monster story, not just being as I pointed out, a kind of a Scooby-Doo-esque story. That it felt like a Scooby-Doo story, even though we had a real monster, but also within the confines of Anne's arc, and making that tie-in with her family and bringing out all that full circle.
Well, and pulling from her past and hinting towards her future.
Right.
With kind of the stuff with, was it Jim?
Bishop.
What?
Oh, Jim.
I'm trying to pull up his name. The one where they're kind of... Bishop.
Yeah.
Where there's
that's what
the romance hints there.
Yeah. Well, establishing a relationship between the two, I kind of like that. Yeah. And not going as far as making them a couple, but showing this blossoming something happening here.
Yeah, Jim's the one that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ones did make it. But getting all that, and then still getting something for Lethbridge-Stewart to do, that he still had his, need and reason to be there. And I really enjoyed the fact that we've squarely got him placed within the confines and trappings of a Doctor Who story that he's not in. And he's there, and he's experiencing the other end of it without getting enough experience to know what's going on that would have created a problematic spoiler for how things wind up turning out.
Right.
That was just handled with kid gloves and just really, really well done.
I also really like that he gave us the confirmation that what we all assumed in Web of Fear and then later in the Brig Time was that he was just kind of going along with the Doctor during the London event about the time travel.
He still doesn't believe in time travel.
He doesn't believe. He was just going along because he needed to.
Right.
It helped speed things up.
Situation dictated, yeah.
I really like that he nailed that down and said, yes, that is not just fan theory, it is fact.
I did like that. I think the other thing that was neat about this is that when we watch Horror of Fang Rock, you feel like the Rutan's just kind of the forward scout. We got the invasion's down the road, but this is the guy that's here to kind of prepare things. And he has crashed, and he's, obviously stuck. What I like about Beast is we then in turn get the greater threat, which is the mothership. We get the near invasion of the Rutons on Earth. And so it takes the intense villain or bad guy or monster in horror, and it elevates it while taking the monster in horror of Fang Rock and kind of relegating to not such a bad guy, more of a good guy, because he is basically sparsed out across these 3 different time periods. So I like how you up the ante, because we still have this major threat.
The Beast wasn't as bad as, or the Rutan wasn't necessarily evil, but the rest of them are.
Exactly,
so, and they're coming.
Exactly, and they are coming, and so that does that. It elevates that aspect of it as well, and I thought that was really played well.
Go ahead, ask me a question. I'll tell you awesome things about this book. I will go all night telling you awesome things about this book. I'm trying to think of
the other things that I wanted to touch on. I think that was most.
Well,
I like the end, where we get the reveal that the ancient, what was his name? The solicitor, the old guy, who kind of set Anne on this path.
Oh, yeah. The guy that in the vault at the
beginning. In the vault at the beginning. Well, not in the vault, but it was a bank vault, not the actual, not the vault.
Solicitor.
The solicitor.
I forgot about that. You're right. And then he makes contact at the end as well. Yeah, I do.
The fact that he winds up being the Rutan.
Yeah.
That he's still around and still there and still in human form, and kind of gotten to that point where it's like, I'm going to have to choose a new body here before too much longer, but that he's still masquerading as her, and that he's the one that set Anne on the path. And you want to talk about
what a timey-wimey idea.
You want to talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy that not only is Anne Travers mixed up with
Bootstrap,
becoming involved in her own legacy, but the catalyst for that is the creature that needed her to go help, So you basically had 2, Mobius strip kind of bootstrap going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Genius. So well good.
I think the other thing, too, that I like is the conflict between the Brigadier and Travers, and that we almost go from a trust that we got in Schizoid Earth to a not quite sure whether we can trust her, because we still have this thing going on with the vault, with the research that she's doing there.
Yeah.
We don't trust the overseers, the government overseers of the vault yet. And I think that that's going to play into down the line when UNIT finally gets established, or at least the lead up to it, whatever they choose to do. And I think that's going to be able to play off you've got the kind of a inner adversary clash going on between 2 military and scientific, and I think that I like that this one kind of sets up those pieces for something that we'll obviously be revisiting again down the line. So, anything else on this?
Go read it if you haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, if you didn't get enough from, the first review we did.
One of my favorite parts of this book is way at the end, where Andy in the thanks.
At the very, very
he
end.
thanks Glenn, Keith, and Sean at Traveling the Vortex. So.
just a second, Bush. I got to read my name in print.
Sean's been in print twice now in the recent.
Yeah, something else that happened to me this week.
Yeah.
Should you explain that real quick since I brought it up?
Oh, I several months back, I wrote into G.I. Joe Comics over at IDW and told them how much I was enjoying things, and they actually published my letter. Apparently, several months back, I'm behind again, so I kind of go these machine gun bursts of reading and catching up on my comics. So.
A little segue there, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, so I got published twice in other people's stuff.
Your name got published. You didn't.
No, I didn't get published. Well, something I wrote got published.
Well,
I didn't write. I didn't publish
true.
anything in this one.
That's true.
Yet.
Andy might be looking for writers in a few years.
I'm going to strong-arm him into that.
Well, speaking of Andy, as Keith alluded to earlier, and we teased ahead, we did get a chance to sit down with the author and Andy Frankham-Allen, and let's go ahead and take a listen to that interview right now.
Well, joining us now is author and deputy editor at Candy Jar Books, Andy Frankham-Allen. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
You're welcome. Always fun.
And I got that right? You're deputy editor at Candy Jar Books?
I am indeed.
Excellent. I want to make sure I got that correct.
You did.
First of all, I think my first question is, what's the weather like over there? Because it's really cold here.
It's been pretty bracing. It's been, although I'm in a t-shirt, so don't, I'm in a t-shirt. But no, outside it's wet, it's windy, it's not nice. It's British weather.
British weather, so typically.
I'm sure you've heard of it,
We've heard of it, that's what it's like. Huh?
Yeah, it's actually real.
Well, let's get started. First thing I want to
we get an author on the program, and you're going to ask him a weather question.
That's the icebreaker question. So you got to get a guess about gutters.
Okay, he's just being British because the British people all they do is talk about the weather, so it's okay. Just blending in.
Well, the first real question I got for you is I want to know how you got started in writing.
Oh, I got started. Good grief! Long story short. Basically, I have been writing since I was proper knee-high, as they say. I remember writing Doctor Who type stories when I was a kid. Like, I remember having this little tiny green book I used to write stupid stories in. Professionally, my first professional gig was in 2004, and that was in one of the Big Finish short trip stories. And that was Gary Russell who got me that job. He had heard from various people that I wanted to write, so he keyed me on an email saying, submit ideas, we're doing this anthology, blah, blah, blah. So I submitted 10, just in case. And he's like, I like all 10, but obviously I can't commission all 10. It's like, bugger. And it just started there, and it's not really stopped since. So it began with Who, which figures,
So you're a Doctor Who fan, obviously.
No,
how did
you stand it?
When did you get started on that? How did you become such a fan?
Oh, gosh. Again, it's one of these things. Being raised in the UK, obviously, in the 70s especially, you couldn't really escape it. It wasn't quite as widespread as it is now. With now, obviously, it's huge. And I've got memories of watching it when I was young, really, really young. And I just always watched it. Although, that said, I did drift away in the 80s as I started to become a teenager because, life became much more interesting outside of the house. And then, oddly, and I, don't judge me on this, but I came back to Doctor Who for episode 2 of Time of the Rani, which is an interesting thing to drag me back into Doctor Who. When I was rewatching the whole series recently, and I got to that point, I'm watching and thinking, what about this episode hooked me in? I mean, really, what hooked me in? Because I have no idea. But
it has a unique charm.
Yes, it definitely has a unique charm, and I've just stayed with it ever since. I mean, I think I have gone through phases over the years where I get a bit, as I say, hooed out. because it's so much. Certainly in the 90s, I went through a phase where I was like, I'm tired of all the books were being released, 2 books a month throughout the year. That was 24 books a year. That's a lot of reading. But I always come back, I always come back because it is my first TV love, and I think it always will be, ultimately. Although there are a few contenders at the moment. But we won't mention them, but,
Let's talk a little bit about the Lethbridge-Stewart line.
Yeah.
How did the series get started? What was the reason why Candy Jar Books decided to pick up and take off with Lethbridge-Stewart?
And why Lethbridge-Stewart?
Why Lethbridge-Stewart? Basically, because I knew, or know rather, the grandson of Mervyn Haseman, of course, co-creator of Lethbridge-Stewart, the character. And through various circumstances, he put me in touch with his sister, Hannah, who's the executor of her grandfather's estate. And she was telling me about some of the stuff that her grandfather's written that never got published. And I'm like, I think Candy Jar might be interested, because Sean's a fan as well, so there may be some interest there. So I started to get in touch with Sean, put in contact with Sean. They got talking. And then after they had their meeting, Sean rang me. He's like, she owns Lethbridge-Stewart. I'm like, I know. And it didn't, for some reason, it didn't occur to me about, that just, I don't know why it didn't. It should have occurred to me straight away, but it did not. But I'm like, I know. And he's like, yeah, but we can use him. I'm like, ah. And of course, well, it was a foregone conclusion, really. It was, like we keep saying, it seemed like when we announced it, so many people were surprised, because it seemed almost like maybe it was a too obvious thing for anybody to really think about. But obviously, it came to us and we did, and here we are. So it was a fairly quick process, in fairness. You'd expect it to have been a long, drawn-out thing, but we arranged the license and contract with Hannah pretty quickly, actually. And I remember, as I said, the first call we had, me and Sean talking about it, and it was one of these, we didn't even consider where would we set the series, because obviously he's got quite a storied life. And it was just instinctively, both of us said, like, post-Web of Fear. It just wasn't even a consideration. We just knew that's where we're going to go. And we did, obviously. You may have noticed.
It's such a ripe and fertile ground of that time between Web of Fear and the Invasion.
Yeah. I mean, there's, like I keep saying, there's basically 4 years-ish, give or take, narrative there. Because in Invasion, he said to me, like, 4 or so years since we last saw, blah, blah. So, that's a fair whack of years to tell a story. At least just, and that's not even going on, what about post-Unit, or post-Battlefield, or, there's so much about his history we still have never really seen. I mean, various books and audios have touched upon it, especially the gap we're doing. There's been a few little bits here and there, references, but it's basically been untapped, so it's kind of an obvious place to literally go back to where it began. That was the beginning of the story, so let's actually pick it up there, and obviously we did.
That's what I find most interesting about it, is that there is a number of things out there that kind of touch on Lethbridge-Stewart's past, kind of give us little hints and indications, but it doesn't seem like, at least in my limited knowledge and research, because unfortunately I haven't had a chance to read a lot of the audio.
You're the newer fan, right?
Yeah, I'm not the newer fan. Actually, Keith is.
Oh, it's Keith.
But when I was in the kind of what's called the wilderness years,
I
we didn't have a lot of access as much here in the States as they did in the UK. And I was kind of distanced from it. It wasn't until just before the new series came back on that I kind of got back into Doctor Who, or back into it. But in my limited research, it doesn't seem like there is a lot of Lethbridge-Stewart's background out there. And so I find it interesting that you guys have been able to kind of have a open sandbox to kind of explore and detail things in Lethbridge-Stewart's life, not just in that post-Web of Fear era, but you've also been able to kind of harken back and give Lethbridge-Stewart a bit of a backstory.
Yeah, it's a strange one because, like you say, there's not a whole lot out there, but there is some. But then part of our issue was a case of all these things that have been revealed about him in the various books and what have you, a lot of these books aren't freely available anymore. You'd really have to track them down, maybe pay a hell of a lot to get them. So the wider fan base may not even be aware of most of it. So it's like, do we behold ourselves to that? All this stuff that most people won't necessarily know? Or do we just kind of go free reign and just, But as you guys know from reading the books, I try to acknowledge stuff as much as I can, in so much that it doesn't constrict us. But it's a juggling act, because we don't want to insult people who have followed the character for 40 plus years, or nearly 50 years actually. But at the same time, we obviously don't want to be constricted by stuff that isn't on the TV. Because if it's anything that's not been on the TV, then I kind of try to make it fit if I can. But if it totally constricts what I'm trying to do creatively, then obviously I'm going to have to kind of ignore it a little bit, because the TV stuff's the barometer. Beyond that, it's it's a juggling act. But
of course, that being said, when you brought David McEntee on board to write Schizoid Verse, he actually sort of tied into
that was
a book that he had written prior.
Face of the Enemy. Yes, that was a directive, I believe the phrase would be, from me. Because when we and Sean first devised, we'll do these 4 books. We obviously want to mine as much of the Hazeman stuff we can, because that's the license. But also, it'd be nice if we can touch on this and this and this. And I always remember being that Face of the Enemy was always one of my favourite sort of standalone Brigadier stories, because in that book, of course, it's just him and the Master leading the way. So it's basically almost a proto-Lethbridge-Stewart novel, in a manner of speaking, So that was one of the things I did say to Sean, like, we need to get McKinsey, because I think it'd be kind of fun to kind of set up Inferno without using the copyright type stuff, but also link it into what David did in It's the Enemy, which is of course a sequel to Inferno. So it kind of gives a kind of trilogy type feel almost. And I did say to him, if we're going to do this, let's bring in Marion Carr, because I remember it being a really good character, and he did a really good job. I think I enjoyed it. It was a process, but it was ultimately enjoyable, I think. People have liked the book quite a bit. I know you guys were a bit up and, but as you say, when you reread it and you really thought more about it, you got the end, you're like, well, no, actually, yeah, it works and it's fun and it's quite different from the other books.
Yeah.
That's obviously something important to us, is that the first 4 books had to be quite diverse. Because I always look at it this way, because I remember Gary Russell once told me, when I was talking to him about Big Finish stuff, saying, like, it must have been cool to be able to do Doctor Who the way you want it. And he's like, oh, no. In my view, I'm going to do not Doctor Who as I want it, because if I just do the Doctor Who I like, then it's only a very small section of fandom's going to like it, who are people who, are keyed in with me. But I have to make Doctor Who that appeals to as broad a range as possible. And I'm very much the same with Lethbridge-Stewart. Like, some of the stories, although obviously I like them because otherwise I wouldn't be working on them, they're not necessarily the stories that I would personally gravitate towards normally, because obviously we've got to reach as many people as we can. So we've got to have as diverse as possible in terms of story. And I think, I don't know, I mean, certainly the response seems to suggest we've succeeded in creating quite a diverse range with the first 4. So that's just the beginning.
Let's talk a little.
Hold on a second, Glenn. I got a question.
Go ahead, please.
Just to dovetail off of what Glenn asked earlier about being able to, try and behold yourself to the immense canon out there that you said you didn't want to do. Were there bits and pieces of it that you thought, oh, I'm totally going to work that in and make it as canonical as I can for my stuff? What was there had to have been a couple of pieces that you were like, yes, I'm taking that.
I think there are certain beats from the stuff that we know of the Brigadier's life around that era that I'm like, I want to obviously acknowledge the fact that he had his first wife, Fiona, who of course is Kate's mother. Although by Kate in New Who kind of implies that all that background's true, so it's kind of you kind of want to acknowledge it in a way, but obviously do it again expectations, which obviously is what we're doing. Then of course, as Group Captain Gilmore, the whole thing with that because that was something established in a few of the books in the 90s. And it's something that's become so accepted in Who fandom that it's like it'd be wrong not to acknowledge it on some level, or at least do our version of it. Not contradictory, but in a slightly different way that's not expected. Because again, it has to be something fresh and new, as long as it doesn't contradict too much, maybe. But yeah, there's certain elements of his story from the other books and stuff that I kind of want to touch base on, but again, not to the point where it's going to constrict what we're doing. Because, obviously we're trying to create new stuff and we don't want to just retell everything that people know. Because where's the fun in that? We want to make new stuff, So it seems we're doing it quite well so far. So far.
Speaking of Gilmore.
Oh, yes.
I am a huge fan of Downtime. I've always liked Mark Platt's. Yeah. I liked the direct-to-video, or it's almost like a fan project in a way, even though it was professionally made and released on video in the 90s, I believe it was. And then Mark also wrote the novelization, which the BBC did canonize in the sense that, loose-based canon, in the sense that it was included in the book range as well, under the Doctor title.
Yeah, and the third Doctor was in it, the fourth Doctor was in it, so it all became kind of,
So I've always been appreciative that you've sort of hinted to the link between Downtime and the Lethbridge-Stewart series, and it seems like you're kind of beholding that to your own canon as well.
Well, Downtime's a difficult one for me, because I remember watching, I've read the book as well, and it's very clearly the second invasion attempt by the intelligence. And clearly, for our books to work, it can't be, because otherwise we can't use intelligence, really. If that was its second attempt in 95, then we've got 30 years of narrative that we can't bring him back in. And that's one of our major licenses, so it'd be stupid not to. So, as you know from that short story Legacies, I've basically put down that Downtime... See, it's a tough one to explain. It really is so complicated. These things you have to think about, it's insane. My theory, the way I baseline Lethbridge-Stewart, is that it spun off from Doctor Who, the TV show, and that's the barometer. That's what we hold the candle to at the end of the day. That's our main point of reference always. So you've got all the BBC books, you've got the New Adventures, you've got Virgin stuff, you've got the audios, you've got so much other stuff which is spun off from TV too, but different points of the TV. So my theory is that all these things are in slightly different continuities, but certain events overlap, but not always in the way that we know. So, for instance, the meeting of Gilmore and the Lethbridge-Stewart in our short story, it echoes Downtime, what's referenced there, but it's not necessarily exactly the same because it's just slightly altered. Because I understand, because I'm a fan and I've done it too. Lots of fans like to try to bring it all together into one massive continuity. But the fact is, some of it just can't be reconciled without major brainstorming, So, again, I know there's fans out there who will happily try and merge it all together, and that's fine. Absolutely. If that's what they want to do, then I'm not going to stop them. But for me, as the editor and trying to get the creative through line, that's how I look at it. So it doesn't contradict, but it doesn't overwrite either.
Well,
so
I think
it's a balance.
I think in that way too, it shows your respect for the material. And I appreciate that as a fan, and as someone that in my head I do that. I try to kind of bring everything together.
I used to do that all the time, but nowadays I have to look at it more objectively because of what I'm doing. As a fan, then the inclination would obviously be to try and fit everything together. But because I've got to look at it not as a fan, I have to be a bit more realistic about it, and that's the price. So,
I think what you did with Forgotten Son and having the Great Intelligence be the splintered version of the Great Intelligence is such a creative way to utilize that aspect of it.
Yeah. But it's quite funny because a few people I've seen to miss that the intelligence in that book is not the intelligence from Web of Fear, the intelligence from way, 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 way in its future.
Yeah.
Post-me with the Doctor. But most people seem to, I would say most, a few people appear to have missed that, which is a shame. Because I thought it was clear, but I don't know, I guess everybody reads stuff differently, So we'll be bringing it back and hopefully we'll make it clear then. You'll make it very clear. That's way, way, way off.
I know that Sean's itching to ask you about Beast of Fang Rock, because Horror of Fang Rock is actually one of his favorite stories.
Yes, like I said, I re-listened to your non-spoiler review, and I remember like, yeah! And the speakers like cracked when he did it. So I'm like, oh yeah.
It's
I remember that now.
It's
because he loves lighthouses. Yeah,
I do love lighthouses, and actually, I wanted to ask that first, which because you and I kind of talked about it off mic, but I mentioned in a Facebook conversation that I felt like there was a lot of lighthouse lore permeated throughout the story, and if that was something that you were interested in, or if that just kind of seeped in as part of your research for the book.
As I said during that conversation ourselves, it's a bit of both. I mean, obviously, I'm a lighthouses, it's all good, but they weren't a huge deal to me. But obviously, I know it's a set on Fang Rock, so I'm thinking, because it's a book as opposed to a TV show where the designers do all the work for you. Because Terrence got it easy. He wrote the script, and the designers had to bring it to life. So he didn't, his research would have been very different to what I had to do. So when I'm researching, I had to make sure I knew what I was talking about because it would have to come through in the text. And we got a lighthouse about 20 minutes away from us. It's a very small one in comparison. But I went there, spoke to the lighthouse keeper, and he's telling me all kinds of stories, a lot of which I actually used in. And I've researched insane amount about lighthouses. I'm just reaching out to get a book to show you. Especially this book I was looking at called Rock Lighthouses of Britain. And it's got so much history about lighthouses, and I got a lot of information from this book. So there's in Fang Rock, a lot of the stories you hear about Fang Rock's past are based on real things, but obviously apply to Fang Rock as opposed to the real lighthouses. So I've lifted, like building stories, like the story about, was it Alfred Scott? That's it.
Yeah.
Alfred Scott character. The story that it gets told about his younger brother who died building the lighthouse, and so he took over because he's the only person who could earn the bread for the family at 15. That's based on a real story of a real event for one of the main focuses. So, so researching it, but it did give me a new appreciation of lighthouses, like real appreciation. And I really, just studying it, I really want to go and visit a proper rock lighthouse in the middle of the ocean and where it's waves just going halfway up the tower. I imagine it would be scary as hell. Oh my God, it would be fun. I wanted to do that during writing, but time wasn't allowing it. It's a shame, because that would have made the book quite different if I had experienced it.
And Terrence Dix wrote the foreword for that one, if I remember correctly. Is that right? For Beast?
He wrote the foreword for Forgotten Son.
Oh, it was Forgotten Son. Well, and then, of course,
Louise Jameson was the...
Yeah, that's right. It was Louise Jameson. But Terrence wrote Horror of Fang Rock.
Of course, yeah.
Had you talked to him about writing Beast at any point before or after you've written it?
Well, my original plan, because obviously, as we know, we lost the title in the first series, so we had to rearrange quickly, and we needed another book to make the four. And in fact, I was hoping we was going to do a Beast of Fang Rock at some point anyway. I've spoken to Terrence about it, and he said like he's busy at the moment, but maybe later. So we discussed the basic idea of what I wanted to do. And then, of course, as I say, his title fell through, so we had to bring Schizoid forward, which meant we had a spot which needed filling very quickly. And because we're still at the start of the series, we don't have many writers who are well-versed enough in what we're doing to get it done as quick as we needed it. So obviously, the only person who could have done it was me. So I kind of had no choice. So I went to Terrence, explained to him the situation, and I said, I want to do it. It's based on, obviously, the stuff we talked about. It's based on the story of the beast that you told in Horror of Fang Rock. And I said, I'll give you the credit, because obviously it's still based on your story, And he was like, yeah, that's fine, no problem. And I said, obviously, we'll... And he was really cool about it, because we chatted a bit about it at the Forgotten Son signing when it got launched as well. So, yeah, he's a proper old school gent. Really is. You hear the stories about Terrence. He's been around the Doctor Who since '69, and he's everything you would imagine him to be. He really is. He's just such a wonderful guy. So it was an honour to do a sequel to one of the biggest, most popular Doctor Who stories. There was no pressure in that. Oh, yeah.
Do you have plans to maybe try and bring Terrence back at some point in time down the road?
I'd like to, definitely like to. But again, it would be obviously depend on his schedule and various other, scenarios and whatnot. But, if time allows and we've got the space in the schedule and all that, then obviously we'd love to in some form or another. I mean, even co-writing a book, maybe. I don't know, whatever. It'd be nice at some point. But it's great that we told him what we're doing with the series and asked him for the forward for Forgotten Son. And he's like, he's like, yeah, pleasure, absolutely. How many words do you want it to be? Tell him how many words. And he delivered it exactly on the word count. I mean, proper old school writing.
The consummate writer there.
Like, these are the words, that's exactly what you get. So it's like, it's so good. It's so nice to deal with people like that. You're like, yeah, you make my job so much easier.
I think that harkens back to the Target novelization days, doesn't it? They used to say, here, go write this story, but it needs to be 268 pages, and then stop.
Yeah. And he did it, It's amazing you think how many of those novelizations he'd done in that period of time. And he was working on Doctor Who, the TV show, at the same time. So, you've got to give the man his due. He's a legend of Doctor Who, and you can't argue that fact. Yeah. So I'm glad that he's done a few of the new Who quick read books too, so at least the newer fans are aware of his genius, So.
And such a sweet guy too.
He is. Lovely guy.
One of the things that I was really struck by is the just sense of tone that you use throughout, and all of the characters, and even going back and pulling somebody like Reuben, and even though you're just kind of simply rehashing some of the dialogue that he had, when they talked about Reuben, I knew instantly that was that Reuben. I mean, you just nailed it by pulling those elements from the original episode so well, and it's permeated throughout this book. Just every single nuance is there.
I'd love to take the full credit for that, but the fact is Terrence did such a great job, and the actors did such a wonderful job with that story. Honestly, if I got it wrong, then I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? Because how can it was just the material, the material I was basing it on and everything is so strong. You'd have to be a complete, to get it wrong. Seriously. So it's credit to Terrence on that. He created some really good stuff that is, it was a pleasure to do.
As a fan, were you thinking the Routons? I mean, there has to be a little bit of, the Routon.
There was loads of moments where that sort of surreal feeling, like, am I really doing this? Am I really Fang Rock? Really? This is just what's going on in my life. I still get that now. Like I read something, like I've just finished editing John Peel's book, and John Peel again, he's one of the old guard. He's done direct novelizations in the 90s. He did some original stuff. He's been around for forever as well. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm working on John Peel. What's going on in my crazy world? I used to be just a dude that used to just make coffee for a living. Now I'm doing this. It's, you can't complain, really.
Well, we don't want to keep you around too long, but I do want to ask you,
no, it's fine.
Without giving too much away, obviously, what can we expect from the future of the Lethbridge-Stewart line?
Gosh, how to answer that diplomatically? It was pointless. I hope that, as we said earlier, there's lots of key points in his story that we kind of have to, the beats we have to hit, But the trick will be for us all is to hit them in ways that aren't expected, because it still has to feel fresh and new. So hopefully we'll see more of that, more of what you've got this year. Although the next 3 books are deliberately so less connected to the wider view of Who, because we obviously need to prove that we're our own series as well. But not to say that we're not doing more, because we do have. Can I really say this? I don't know, maybe not. These interviews are bad. I say so much all the time. We have plans for lots of key moments in his life. There's this year, for instance, like the 6 books. The first 3 are quite standalone-ish in the sense of they're not necessarily connected to the larger scape of Who, but their development of everything we've done so far, the setting up of the 5th operational core, the proto-unit thing that we're obviously setting up, you'll finally see that happen in the first 3 books. Again, hopefully not quite the way you're expecting it to be. You can expect them to move to Scotland, which would be quite fun, back to his homeland. So we get to explore this other side of his ancestry, so that'd be quite fun. Obviously, we've got to see a lot more of Anne, because one thing we were very, very, very keen on from day one is that she was going to be a co-lead in the series, and we were, as you said in your review for Fang Rock, we were clearly building her up throughout each book till she took lead in Fang Rock. And you'll see her take lead once or twice again, Shortly will return, of course.
Yay!
Back. The Dominators will return, not necessarily this year, but we have got a plan for them. The Great Intelligence do return.
Does that mean we get to see more Quarks?
Well, they were all destroyed, weren't they? But that said, at the end of Nuclear Shield Domination, I'm looking down because I can see the book. Not because I'm just weird. At the end of that book, it does mention that some Quark tech and stuff went onto the vault, and that eventually ends up where the brig's going. I can't call him a brig.
I think we just do, though, don't we? I mean, that's just what we've known it for so many years.
Well, that's another thing, of course. We will also be showing him earning that name, because he's going to get promoted, obviously, sooner than later. Because, again, the perception is that he was promoted to Brigadier when he took over unit. But, again, that's a 4-year gap. So I think, was that straightforward? No. And that's the fun we got. That's what we've got to look forward to, is that those 4 years we're telling, the stuff that you know from Invasion and Spearhead and everything else, you'll get to see these things being built up bit by bit, and hopefully in new ways that won't necessarily be anticipated. And if they are, then obviously we're not doing our job very well, because we have to keep you guys on your toes. But I'm sure you'll let us know if it's working or not, don't worry. We'll be tuning in.
You mentioned that post-Battlefield, is there plans after tackling this 4-year gap to jump to the end of his timeline?
Well, ideally, again, ultimately it will always come to, as long as the fans are wanting it and we make enough money, because obviously it's a business, all that. If it's viable to continue doing, then I have provisional plans to have at least 3 phases of the narrative. Obviously, we've got the 4-year now. Then we'll hopefully get around to doing a post-unit stuff, explain why, how he left unit and why he went into teaching and the truth behind that. Because I've come up with some interesting takes on why he's actually teaching. Again, it's not quite clear as we believe, because where's the fun in that? And yes, so then it'd be and then you've got that big gap of basically post-Battlefield to his death, which is a long few years. We're talking 97 through to 2012-ish. So that's a fair whack of years to tell, showing him going through his old age and all this stuff. So not provisional plan, but again, it's always dependent on how successful and popular and the reception and everything else is. As long as fans keep wanting it. And that said, of course, I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot if I'm still there at the end of it, because that would be a lot of time taken in my life. Honestly, if I was there right to the end of it, then realistically speaking, for me, that'd probably be about 20 years of work, because it'd probably take that long.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, because although we keep saying it's the 4-year gap, doesn't mean it's only going to be 4 years for us to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
The first 4 books, for instance, only cover 4 months of those 4 years. So if you work it out, that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
Plus all the short stories in between, and God knows what else we can do. Although I have got a short story I'm working on for next year, well, sort of novella, which will be set at a different period of his life. don't want to give it too much away right now, but it's going to be set primarily, I believe, in the late 80s.
Oh.
But hopefully in ways that won't necessarily be expected, hopefully. So yeah, it's basically it's going to be a kind of what could we do that's not expected, but also hitting these beats. I mean, a good example when I keep talking about that to explain is in Invasion. It's stated very clearly that Anne and her dad have gone to America for a year. That's why they're not in our story. So we obviously have to get our characters to that point within those 4 years that we're doing. So by the end of that 4-year story, that's where Anne's got to leave with Travers and go off to America. So we have to do that. But how we do it will hopefully, again, be something quite different and not what people would probably expect. So I say that now, you're going to start expecting it.
Well, that's for you now. I think that's what I like, Andy, is the fact that it is in ways that we don't expect it, and it always seems to be that way. And you guys seem to kind of be stretching the bounds of storytelling, and I think that's what is most appreciative of this series. Is while I think we've said in the past that it feels like watching an episode of Doctor Who. There's times where it's very much like Doctor Who, and then there's times where it's very much its own thing. And I think that striking that balance between the two is certainly what makes this series enjoyable. And so I'm excited to hear you say that you guys are going to continue to kind of stretch that down.
Well, yeah, we have to, because the trick is, like I keep saying all to the authors, when they come on board, this is what we're doing. So give it that nostalgic feel of the 60s/70s, but still make it fresh and new for today's audience. So trying to merge today's modern way of storytelling and perceptions of what story is and characters, and the way we do that, I think, is that all the stories ultimately are about the people. Ultimately, it's the characters that are leading the story. Like Chorley led Mutually Assured Domination. Obviously, Lethbridge-Stewart led The Forgotten Son, and the story about a family was at the heart of Beast of Fang Rock. And of course, Schizoderf was very much about the Brigadiers family again. And that's the modern way of telling stories. It's always about the emotional journey of the characters. I mean, that's how, S.H.I.E.L.D., Supernatural, all that great stuff out there. It's always about the characters, always about what they're going through. Whereas the old way was more about the story, about the plot, about, So it's trying to, again, find that balance, giving it that emotional core, but still making it feel like it could have existed in that period of Doctor Who in the 60s and 70s. So, again, it's a tough one to find that right balance. But I think most of the time we've managed to do that, I think. I'm sure there's a few moments where it's not quite worked, but, early days, we've only done it for 1 year so far, so it's still very early days. And last year was definitely a learning curve for all of us. This year, everything's a lot smoother already. Because as I say, by the end of last year, I already had all the first 3 books of this year planned out. The last 3 books of this year are being written now, and I'm already working with authors on the 6 titles for next year. So, and making provisional plans for 2018, because that's the 50th anniversary of the Brig.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So obviously, we have to do something for that. We've got, again, not to give anything away, but we do have some interesting ideas for a trilogy of books to celebrate this 50 years of the Brig, which again, hopefully, will be very unexpected. But it's going to take a lot of planning, that one, to get it right. Hopefully we can do it.
I think you will.
Well, I hope so.
Well, Andy,
I have faith in you.
I'm sure we can sit here and chat with you all night, but I'm afraid we're only going to have a limited amount of time to go, and it's probably getting late there for you. So, on behalf of
it's all good.
On behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for number one, the work you've been putting into the and Candy Jar Books for all that you guys have done with this series.
Glenn, lean into your mic just a little bit, bud.
We all quite enjoy it. And thank you, obviously, for joining us on this interview and allowing our listeners to get a little bit of insight into the Lethbridge-Stewart series.
Can I just say one thing before we go?
Yes, please.
because I just remembered that I was supposed to mention this, and we got so sidetracked I forgot to mention it, and I will get a slap on the wrist.
That's okay. That's okay.
Don't forget, from next month we have the audiobooks of Series 1 coming
yes,
out.
absolutely. Yeah.
Which, and as I say, I've listened to the first chapter and the prologue, and Terry Molloy does an amazing job. He really does something. It was weird listening because obviously I wrote it, but I got so caught up in it I kind of forgot that I'd written it because he obviously narrates it, but he also brings the characters to life quite in a way that it's quite weird when you write it. You think, did I do that? Was that really mine? That's weird. So it's really exciting time. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. So not only have we got 6 new books this year, plus other stuff, we have 4 audiobooks coming out through Phantom Films. So yeah, it's an exciting time. Crazy, but exciting. So yeah, make sure everybody picks up those.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Hopefully we can get you on the show again in a future time.
Hey man, anytime, so let us know.
All right.
But let's work out the kinks next time.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Andy.
All right, man. You guys take care, yeah?
You too.
You too.
And there you go. So I hope you enjoyed that. And again, we want to thank Andy for joining us on the program because he was able to pencil us in today. And as we talked to him this afternoon here, it was evening for him, and I was afraid it was getting very late. So, although he didn't seem to mind, he almost seemed like he could have sat and chatted with us for much longer as well. I think we were all having a really good time. Yeah, we were all having a grand time. So, unfortunately, this shows we don't want to make it too large. So.
Yeah,
we do need to get on Kieran and find out.
I'd love to get Andy to
bring him
come
to
here
time.
for time, Eddie.
That would be
especially since John Peele's going to be there.
Yeah. So, Sean, what do we have coming up on the schedule?
Well, coming up on the schedule, which I was terrified during Friday Night Who that I had typed it in incorrectly, and I had to go double-check myself. And it turns out I was right. So, yay. For those of you that do follow the scheduling, yes, we had originally planned to do some Titan Comics tonight as well with the 10th Doctor. We have in the... as with real shows, when they have interviews with guests, needed to bump them. So they will. They've been bumped. They're back in the green room, and we'll trot them out at some point in time down the road. Not sure when yet. But coming up,
when we need a Kevin Nealon to come out and fill the Tonight Show.
When Friday Night Who for this coming week is the animated Scream of the Shalka, so you can feel free to join us for that at midnight on Friday. We push play and feel free to tweet along. Hashtag Friday Night Who. And we've already reviewed that one, so that means episode number 226. We are going to start the second season of Big Finish's 8th Doctor Adventures, starting with number 1, Dead London, and number 2, Max Warp, which I'm all excited for because it's about time we get some more Paul McGann on the show.
Yes.
Following that up is Doctor Who the Movie for Friday Night Who, which again is one we've already reviewed, but that gives us the opportunity to go beyond the Doctor the following week. With Paul McGann in With Nail and I. So we will be watching that film and then kind of disseminating his performance on the show, and hopefully he's in it a little bit more than Sylvester McCoy was in Dracula.
Oh, and we'll probably also touch on
I have on good authority. I have on good authority that he is in it a lot more.
I believe you're right there. And as Keith pointed out, we'll also touch on Richard E. Grant, just because, well, he's also played the Doctor.
A twofer.
Twice.
Then we're going to start a new discussion on Lost episodes, starting with William Hartnell's The Crusade. We are planning on doing at least part of it for Friday Night Who, which could present a little bit of a logistical problem because I don't know how easy it'll be to track a hold of whatever pieces of it. I haven't even looked, quite honestly, to see what's available. I know that it's in the Lost in Time box set, whatever is out there.
I know that through the limited research that I've done, that the loose canon stuff has shown up on YouTube, so that might be an option for people. Keep in mind, though, if you watch along with us, you want to make sure you have maybe several windows open so you can just pop over and start the next one as soon as
or set up a playlist.
Yeah, that would work too. We've got access to the loose canon episodes ourselves, so we will be reviewing the loose canon versions.
Thank you for
I don't know if there are. I know there are several different groups that we're putting together recons. Primarily, we will be focusing on loose cannon, unless there's just something not available from loose cannon. But I do know that we have access to the Crusade that was reconstructed by loose cannon.
And then, obviously, future stuff coming up. I want to throw a shout-out for anybody who's local in the area that we will be appearing at Empower Comic Con, which is happening here in Topeka, Kansas, on, what are the dates here? February 20th and 21st. So it's a weekend con. It's here in Topeka. It's at the Capitol Plaza Hotel, and it's all about empowering you to be you. And we were invited by charity, so we're gonna go.
Yep.
I'm excited.
Your opportunity to see us live. No, I don't know what we're doing yet. So there's that.
All right. Is there anything else? Obviously, if you're already supporting us on Patreon, continue to subscribe or support us on Patreon. And if you're not, please consider doing so. You can also click on the various links on the right side of our homepage, and profits from those portions of those profits go to us. So, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right. That's going to do it for this week. Until next week, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
And that.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.